Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, children. Welcome to math class. So today we are getting into our next topic, and it's all about rational numbers. Rational numbers is just a fancy way to say numbers that you already all know about. A rational number this is, I don't know what happened there. This is any number that can be written as a fraction of a over b, and b cannot equal 0. So a rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction, which would be fractions, which would be whole numbers, which would be most decimal numbers. So really it's any kind of number that can be written as a fraction. So when we think about fractions, we want to think about what our favorite thing to do in math class is. And our favorite thing to do in math class is to simplify. We want to simplify our fractions down to make it so we can't simplify anymore. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to do today. First thing we want to do is we want to simplify. Second thing we want to do today is we want to go from a decimal to a fraction. And the last thing we want to do today is go from a fraction to a decimal. Those are the three goals we have today. These are our goals. Simplify fractions, go from a decimal to a fraction, and go from a fraction to a decimal. So, first thing we want to think about. We're going to talk about simplifying fractions. Talk about simplifying fractions. If we have the fraction 24 over 32. We want to think to ourselves, okay, well, 24 and 32, those both have common factors. Those have some common factors in them. Those can both be divided by the same number. So, what is a number that 24 and 32 can both be divided by? Well, they can both be divided by 4. And that would give me 24 divided by 4 is 6. 32 divided by 4 is 8. That would give me 6/8. Now, is this in simplest form? Or is there a number that both 6 and 8 can be divided by? Well, there is. You can divide 6 and 8 both by 2. And we would get 3 over 4. And 3 over 4 is non-simplifiable. We would call this that these are relatively prime numbers. These numbers, in relationship to one another, don't have any common factors. This is simplest form. So we can divide both by 4 and then by 2. We could have divided them both by 8. We could have taken everything here and divided them both by 8. That would have worked as well. Lots of different ways that we could go about doing this. Now, let's say we had something like 15 ninths. Can we simplify 15 ninths? Well, 15 and 9 can both be divided by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 9 divided by 3 is 3. That would give us the fraction of 5/3. So we want to look, when we're simplifying fractions, can we divide our top and bottom number by the same thing? The reason we want to divide it by the same thing is 3 over 3 that we're dividing it by is the same thing as 1. And when we multiply or divide something by 1, it doesn't actually change our value. So because these are the same number, it's not changing our value here. We're keeping the same value because we're dividing the top and bottom by the same amount. Okay, so we can do it as long as we're dividing our top and bottom by the same amount. Go ahead, let's simplify this one, and then you can move on to our next thing. Let's take the fraction. We'll go 54 and 18/54. All right, simplify down to 18/54, and then let's move along. All right, so moving right along, we've simplified. Great job. Now, we want to talk about turning decimals into fractions. So, when we talk about decimals, we want to talk about what are called terminating decimals. There's two types of decimals we have. We have terminating decimals. Whoops. And those are decimals that end. 2.5, negative 3.125, 8.7834. Those are terminating decimals. Those decimals end. There are also repeating decimals. And those decimals don't end, but they go on forever. 1.3 forever. 9.999 forever. Decimals that go on forever and ever and ever, those are repeating decimals. Different kinds of things. Both terminating and repeating decimals are rational. So when we're talking about rational numbers, we might see terminating, we might see repeating. To do this, we're going to be focusing on terminating decimals. All right, let's say I have a decimal that looks like 5.59, and I want to turn this into a fraction. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my whole number as my whole number. 5. Now I'm done with it. I brought this out, I'm leaving it. Now, what I want to do is I want to take my decimal section here, and I want to say, okay, what place value is my last digit? Well, this 9 is in the hundredths place value, so because it's in the hundredths place value, my denominator will be 100, and my numerator will be whatever my value was. So this becomes my numerator, place value becomes my denominator. Value is my numerator, place value is my denominator. And then I look and go, can I simplify 59 100ths? Well, I cannot, so I'm going to leave it just like this. Okay, place value becomes denominator, value becomes numerator. Let's try that with a different one. Let's change some of my colors here. Go a nice blue, and how about a red? No, that one's already kind of red. We'll go with a green. All right, let's say I have, what do I want to have? I will have, oops, I just did 5. Negative 7.125. Okay, so whole number is just going to stay my whole number. 125. My 5 is in the thousandths place, which means this is going to be 1,000, and my value is going to go up top here, and I have negative 7 and 125 thousandths. I believe I can simplify 125 thousandths, so let's try. These can both be divided by 5. This gives me 25 over, what would that be, 200? Well, those can both be divided by 5 still. And I get 5 over 40, And those can both be divided by 5 still. And I get 1 over 8. So this right here is the same thing. So my real answer would be negative 7 1/8. And that's my value. I converted into my fraction, and then I simplified my fraction as many times as it took till I can't simplify anymore. All right, before we move on to our last thing, you try this one. We'll go with make that into a fraction, and then let's move on. All right, last but certainly not least is turning fractions into decimals. Having a fraction and turning it into a decimal. So, let's say I have the fraction 7/8. A fraction is just division. I don't know who is laughing out in the hallway right now, but it's much too early in the day for that. So a fraction is division. And the way we divide is we put our top number goes on the inside, bottom number goes on the outside. I would write this down if I were you so you don't forget. Okay, and then we divide. 8 goes into 7, 0 times. Can't do that. I'm going to add a decimal and bring it up and add a 0. 8 goes into 70. Will that be 7 times? I feel like that goes into it 7 times. 8 times. Goes in 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. Give me a 6. Add a 0, bring it down. Goes into 7 times. I don't know why I said that. 7 times. 8 times 7 is 56. Gives me a 4. Gives me a 0. 5 times. Gives me a 40. Gives me a 0. So my turning into a decimal is 8.75. So when I'm turning a fraction into a decimal, I'm going to divide my two numbers. I'm going to want to add my decimal point, and as many zeros as it takes in order to solve this value. Okay, keep adding zeros till I either find it's repeating or that it finally ends. It will do one of those two things. It will either repeat or it will finally end. All right, turn this fraction into a decimal, and let's go from here. Let's say we have 18/40. Hint, it might be easier to simplify before you start dividing. Okay, bye, love you.